we got into 1758, right? We were talking about William Pitt. We said he was going to begin to change the war. He said he wanted to win. He wanted Ohio. He sent new young officers named Wolfe and Amherst. Ladies and gentlemen, William Pitt is a name. I know he's English. You need to know him because this is what changes the French-Indian War. We were going to lose. Period. William Pitt comes in, and that changes. Before I go any further, there's something that I didn't bring up in your class that I brought up in the other class. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to do it. What we'd like you to do, folks, is what would make more sense chronologically is you might want to put 1754 around Fort Necessity. Ladies and gentlemen, it's called the Albany Plan. It is not a complicated item. Folks, this is one of the items most of you will get. The Albany Plan, notice, it's made 1754. Why am I going back? It's right after Fort Necessity. So the French and Indian conflict is just beginning. George Washington was just captured. The Albany Plan is made by Benjamin Franklin. And no, this is not the real one. I didn't get it, so I'm going to have a fake piece of paper. The Albany Plan is made by Benjamin Franklin, and it's a snake. It's a snake that is cut into 8 pieces. And the bottom of it says, join or die. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Franklin draws that design, and he sends out invitations to all the colonies. Some of you might be wondering why there are 8, because Benjamin Franklin included all of the head as New England instead of each colony. Okay? And then I believe the Carolinas were together. The idea is Benjamin Franklin is arguing that by ourselves we are weak, but if any part of the snake is cut, the entire snake dies. The 13 colonies are vulnerable. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the big item, the item that really you want to be thinking? Ladies and gentlemen, in 1754, Benjamin Franklin proposes a meeting called Albany. He invites everybody to Albany, New York. Benjamin Franklin proposes that 13 colonies should unite for the purpose of military defense and trade. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin Franklin is proposing some form of a relationship with the colonies. If you want, you could call it some sort of a government. You could call it some sort of a united front. I want to be very clear. What is he not proposing in any way, any shape, any form?
Independence.
Folks, this has nothing against England. Benjamin Franklin in no way is insulting England. He is saying the French are a threat. Individually, we are weak. If we work together, we would be better prepared at fighting them off. What is the other thing that you are likely to see about the Albany Plan? The 13 colonies overwhelmingly say no. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1754, the most popular man in America proposes working together. The colonies say no. They don't like each other. They have no relationship with each other. In fact, under mercantilism, normally they compete with each other. No. What is the thing I need you to think about? 22 years later, those same 13 colonies that said, no, we don't want to help each other. We don't want to support each other. We will not work together against our enemy, the French. What we are about to get to is somehow or another, in 22 years, the 13 colonies will decide to join together and unite against Mother. So when we look at this unit, that is what you want your brain around. Your unit is about how do 13 divided, disorganized counties that have no relationship make a decision to join together against the most powerful nation on earth with the crazy idea of independence. And for those of you who have never seen National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, you know the one where they steal the Declaration of Independence? I don't care about that right now. What I care about is, what did he say? The men who did that committed treason. The men who signed that piece of paper were telling the king that they were traitors. If the revolution failed, they would have been drawn in court. They would have been executed. They were criminals. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we are trying to look at. How, why will the colonies go from we won't even help each other against our enemy to we will join up against Mom? And that is what it is. 1758, back to where we were. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the first thing you want to identify? William Pitt's in charge. Yay! Think of the name, William Pitt. And we have our first battle coming. Good. 58. And we send James Wolfe. So James Wolfe arrives with the new British Army. He's younger. What's the first major change? James Wolfe has contacted the Iroquois Nation, one of the Indian tribes that hates the Huron. The Hurons are the primary Indian allies of the French. What James Wolfe does is we begin to take Indians, which are historical enemies, and divide them. Just because we don't like Indians doesn't mean we can't use them. And then James Wolfe marches out to the frontier. Ladies and gentlemen, just as we saw with George Washington, just as we saw with Edward Braddock, the battle will be at Fort Duquesne. How do you separate? This is 1758. It is the second battle. Remember, the first one is when Braddock got his butt kicked. He died in 1758 with more men, the British Navy, new young officers, Indian allies. For the first time in the war, the English win. Ladies and gentlemen, what you want to identify about William Pitt is he wants to win. He is going to fight to win. Ladies and gentlemen, the best example I could give is imagine a football game. Every time you get the ball, you hand it back to the other team and say, here you go. You stop them. You give them the... In the French and Indian War, up until William Pitt, England was fighting out of spite and anger with no purpose. Simplify at this point. Oh, you already said it. Fort Duquesne immediately becomes Pittsburgh. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where you start making connections. Pittsburgh is a reference to William Pitt. It still is to this day. French and Indian War, you're not going to need to know a lot of battles. Do you understand that? You're not. What happens starting at this moment in 1758? The English go on the offensive. For 3 years, the English lost. Starting with Fort Duquesne, which becomes Fort Pitt, the English begin to push back. And for the next several years, the English begin to win battle after battle. Ladies and gentlemen, William Pitt turned the war. The English are going to be much more aggressive. The English are going to have much better equipment. And the English are the ones who begin to start winning. In fact, the English don't just protect their land. They don't. What was all this about? Where did the war, what was the war over? Ohio. Remember the forts? The English not only recapture or capture those forts, the English then decide, why don't we go after this? So what happens by 1760 is Wolfe and Amherst begin to target Montreal and Quebec. The 1760 is when the British, so notice, now what are the English after? It is no longer Ohio. The English are literally trying to drive the French out of America. I mean, that literally becomes the philosophical change. Let me make one correction. Technically, Quebec is first, and it would actually be 1759 that we start the siege. I do apologize. Montreal will be 1760. Folks, you're not going to need to know a lot other than we captured both of them. Ladies and gentlemen, for our purposes, what we need to understand is after William Pitt comes in, the war completely changes. We protect Ohio, we drive the French, we even capture the 2 largest cities in Canada. Some of you might want to know, for those of you who actually like the history, the Battle of Quebec is very famous. There's paintings about it. What makes the Battle of Quebec very famous is it was the very kind of the marquee fort of the French. It was a walled city, and what became famous is the fort was considered invincible. That happens a lot in history, you know, like the Trojan horse, the Trojan War. Anybody remember what is the deceit or what is the key thing that happens in the Battle of Quebec? Ladies and gentlemen, the problem with the city of Quebec is it's built up in these high bluffs that overlooks the St. Lawrence River. The city itself is basically built on a rock bed. It was built on such a defensive position that there really was no way to get, like, drill wells. So what they did is they dug tunnels through the walls, and at night the French would go out and literally get water from the St. Lawrence River. Well, what happened is the English began to notice, or they began to sort of spot the French soldiers getting the water. Eventually the English figure out where they are, where they're coming from. The English basically used the tunnels to get inside the city. And the Battle of Quebec, most of it takes place inside the city. It's a very bloody hand-to-hand battle. Technically, both James Wolfe and Montcalm, the French general, are actually killed in the battle. So the Battle of Quebec, if you look at the battles of the war, is probably the most famous. It was the one that has the most sort of history to it. It's because it was, you know, this was the main French stronghold. We have kind of this very interesting plan to get inside, and both generals were killed. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, if you want to use 1760, the colonists believe the war is over. The French, for the most part, have been beaten. So what happens? If you were an American, a colonist, technically English, what would be their reaction now that they believe the war is over? The colonists immediately want to go to Ohio, correct? Who's that going to piss off? Especially Indians that had just allied with the English, right? The other thing you want to be aware of is the actual war does not end for 3 years, because even though the war stopped in America, the English and the French continue to fight. The actual agreement is going to take a couple of years, 1763.